Peace in the north of Ireland could have broken out in 1970, but in April, amid a backdrop of Sectarian Orange marches, communal violence and a wave of bomb attacks in Belfast, mainly targeting Ulster Unionist Party politicians, fears of insurrection by the Irish Republican Army grew. Unionist voters spoke and elected hardline firebrands Ian Paisley and William Beattie of the Protestant Unionist Party. The political dam of unionism burst for the UUP, the monolith of political unionism shattered, and so began the slow strangulation of the party at the hands of Paisley and the subsequent party, the Democratic Unionist Party. The rest is history. But history can be corrected. Buried in secret British military intelligence files, written at the time and discovered by paper trail over the last 8 years, is evidence that the British Armed Forces believed that this wave of bombings were not the work of the IRA, but false flag attacks by the loyalist Ulster Volunteer Force, designed, yet again, to undermine their own unionist government, stoke sectarian violence and pave the way for the UVF's preferred electoral candidates, Paisley and Beattie. And they succeeded. My name is Kieran McArch, and these are the UVF false flag bombs that blew Paisley and Beattie into office. The year before, in March and April of 1969, there was a series of bomb attacks on the electrical and water infrastructure of Northern Ireland, which were blamed on the Irish Republican Army. They were actually false flag attacks carried out by loyalist members of the Ulster Volunteer Force, UVF, and the Ulster Protestant Volunteers, UPV, closely associated with the sectarian firebrand, Reverend Ian Paisley. We knew that within months. It has since been alleged by Britain's state broadcaster, BBC, that Paisley helped finance the bombings, never mind providing cover for them and politically benefiting from them. In the words of the Northern Ireland Prime Minister Terence O'Neill, the bombs literally blew him out of office at the end of April 1969. The planners also aimed to discredit the civil rights movement, provoke a hardline unionist response against O'Neill's modest reforms, and inflame the usual fear about the IRA, which had limited capacity at the time. The UVF began bombing the Republic of Ireland in August 1969, but only when Kilkeel UVF UPV member Thomas McDowell electrocuted and mortally wounded himself whilst trying to bomb an electrical substation in Ballyshannon, County Donegal in October 1969, did it become public knowledge that the UVF had been the perpetrators of these bombs and the bombing of Northern Ireland infrastructure in the months before. These bombs worked, and we know what happened in the interim period since they toppled O'Neill. Sectarian marches, police violence, communal rioting, and British Army boots back on the streets of the Orange Statelet. The conflict had started in earnest. Paper trail has discovered unredacted British military intelligence files from the following year, 1970, that show that the British Army commanders believed that a wave of bomb attacks targeting so-called moderate unionist politicians, businesses, and even an elderly Protestant woman were not the work of the IRA, but again, false flag bomb attacks by the UVF that lay unclaimed and or were blamed on the IRA. Whilst this particular series of explosions continued a pattern of attacks on moderate nationalist and liberal politicians such as Austin Currie, Sheila Murnaghan and New Ulster Movement, the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland launched in April 1970, they remain important as they occurred at a time of terrible communal violence. They targeted so-called moderate Ulster Unionist leaders in the throat of local Stormont and national Westminster elections, and arguably greatly impacted the results, which changed the course of Northern Ireland history. Again, the British military recognised that the aim of the UVF bombers, quote,
could be, as on earlier occasions, to discredit both government and security forces, with the subsidiary intention of promoting sectarian indignation.
The intention was similar in 1966 when the UVF fired through the door of the Shankill home of hardline Unionist MP John McQuaid in April 1966, with the aim that the attack was blamed on the IRA. 4 years later, in a major electoral upset for the Orange State's Ulster Unionist Party, hardliners of the Protestant Unionist Party, the Reverend Ian Paisley and William Beattie, gained Stormont seats. Paisley won the seat vacated by Terence O'Neill when he took a peerage to the House of Lords. Paisley then won the Westminster election for North Antrim in June 1970, beginning a national political career that spanned generations and lasted until 2008. The negative and positive impacts of Paisley on the history of Northern Ireland will be debated for generations to come, but hopefully we will learn more about his deep connections to loyalist paramilitarism and violence, so future generations can properly measure these as well against the sectarian and violent history of the statelet. Paisley's close confidants and UPV colleagues were involved directly in the 1969 bombs. He gave lifts to the likes of UPV UVF member Noel Docherty and UVF Billy Mitchell to meetings to secure explosives, and in 2019 BBC Spotlight alleged that Paisley actually supplied money to the UVF to fund the bombings in 1969 whilst he himself was in prison for unlawful assembly. Nevertheless, Paisley's Protestant Telegraph reported on the 5th of April after the UPV UVF bomb attack on the water pipeline at Dunadry, quote,
"This is the first act of sabotage perpetrated by the IRA since the murderous campaign of 1956. Suggestions have been made that an IRA splinter group was responsible for the blast. But the sheer professionalism of the blast indicates the work of the well-equipped IRA. This latest act of IRA terrorism is an ominous indication of what lies ahead for Ulster. This province has continually been subjected to IRA barbarism, especially sabotage and ambush. Loyalists must now appreciate the struggle that lies ahead and the supreme sacrifice that will have to be made in order that Ulster will remain Protestant."
Aside from close dealings with loyalist paramilitaries throughout his career, including the likes of the Ulster Workers' Council strike of 1974 and United Unionist Action Council strike, or the Paisley strike of 1977, Ian Paisley had a long history of direct involvement with setting up loyalist paramilitary groups from as early as 1956 and the setting up of Ulster Protestant Action, UPA. Paisley's Ulster Protestant Volunteers, UPV, followed in 1966. His third force followed in 1981, and the DUP's paramilitary wing, Ulster Resistance, in 1986. British intelligence helped rearm Ulster Resistance and the other main loyalist paramilitary groups, UVF and UDA, in the late 1980s, but Ulster Resistance has never decommissioned its share. Now, of course, Paisley throughout his career denied any connection to loyalist violence. Nevertheless, the British Army in these 1970 files makes the connection between Paisley and loyalist paramilitary violence. Sectarian Orange marches, intercommunal violence and displacement in Ballymurphy, New Barnsley and Springmartin areas were the grim backdrop at the beginning of April 1970. Paisley was in the thick of it from the 1st of April and demanded an interview with the commanding officer of the British Army regiment in the area, the 1st Battalion of Royal Scots. The British Army files that Paper Trail uncovered also recovered Paisley's threat that, quote, if he was not given satisfaction, he would bring down the Shankill Boys to Ballymurphy tonight. The Royal Scots sought guidance from Brigade. The Brigade's military intelligence officer recorded later that Paisley has rung the Commissioner to say he is worried about the area. If military do not take action, he will bring Protestants from all over Belfast to defend the area. Crowds on either side began gathering again around 8 p.m. with the return of the new Barnsley Orange Parade, and they were throwing bottles and stones within the half hour. The situation deteriorated until the British Army moved reinforcements in from nearby battalions. By 11:29 p.m. that night though, Royal Scots reported situation is in two distinct parts. Devasmore Steps, quiet. Springmartin, active. The Catholic part of the road, in other words, was quiet, whilst the Protestant side was active. The British Army deployed A Company, 1st Battalion Light Infantry to Devasmore to support B Company, 1st Battalion Royal Scots units there, and it was A Company of the Light Infantry that is first reported as having thrown gas grenades at 11:44 p.m. Royal Scots reported that it checked on gas supplies and the area was quiet at 3 minutes to midnight. 5 minutes later though, B Company reported it was now using gas too against the Catholic area. That is how the gassing of Ballymurphy began.